One commonly held dream amongst musicians, mix engineers, and mastering engineers alike is to have a single control that just simply makes things sound better. Well, today we're actually going to talk about a plugin that almost makes that dream a reality. Hello, I'm Robert McClellan and this is the Home Studio Simplified channel. On this channel you'll find tons of tutorials to help you make better sounding music, gear reviews to help inform you about future purchases, and interviews with professionals in the audio community. And by the way, I also give away a ton of stuff around here. So if this sounds like awesomeness to you, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and while you're at it, follow through with a good old-fashioned bell ringing so that every time I upload a new video, you can swing by and give it a thumbs up. So what is this magical plugin that makes everything sound better at the touch of a button? I'm talking about the Gullfoss EQ by Soundtheory. Although Soundtheory's Gullfoss isn't quite that simple, it is capable of extraordinary results despite having only 5 user parameters and an operation manual that's just 1 page long. So the big question is, does it actually work? Well, we'll get into some sound examples here in just a moment, but in my professional opinion, yes, it really does. As you'll soon hear, the Gullfoss provides a natural sounding sheen of clarity to a mix while also helping to lift out detail. It's as if the sonic fog that fills up the space in between the instruments is somehow dissipated. Single tracks such as percussion and acoustic guitar can really benefit from its usage, and when placed on the master bus, the whole mix actually seems to come into better focus across the entire spectrum. Alright, enough talking, let's get behind the speakers and let's actually see this thing in action.
When double-tracking instruments, especially acoustic guitar, given the fact that both instruments would track with different microphones, you're going to run into some phase issues. If we were to zoom in on these waveforms, you would actually see that here. One thing that the Gullfoss EQ boasts is that it not only removes elements from a recording that doesn't sound pleasing to the ears and adds elements that do, but it also helps with phase issues. Let's take a listen to it now on these dual-tracked acoustic guitars and see if it can in fact do what it's claiming that it can do. In order to hear an accurate representation of exactly what this is doing, it would be best for you to listen on either studio monitors or a good set of studio headphones so that you can hear an accurate representation of what the plugin is doing. Another thing to make mention is that these are completely dry recorded tracks going straight from the microphone into the Focusrite 6i6 into the DAW. The only processing that's being done on these tracks is the limiter that's on the master bus to bring up the loudness for you to be able to hear what's actually going on. So let's take a listen to the tracks without any processing being done whatsoever. I have panned one to the left and one to the right to give it the stereo effect. Loud music in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that was before the Gullfoss effect was added. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually invert the phase on one of these channels and make it sound a little bit better. Let's listen to that. Although that did sound a little bit better, it didn't quite bring it to the place where I felt like it could be. The phase definitely seemed like it got a little more cohesive, but let's listen now to what the Gullfoss can do on these tracks when placed on the master bus, which means that both of these tracks will now be running straight into the Gullfoss and then hitting the limiter afterwards. I'll do a before and after, so we'll start before the effect is enabled, and then I'll enable it shortly into. So one thing that I did while this track was playing, just to try to get an accurate representation of if the plugin was actually doing what it claims to do or not, was I was actually inverting the phase there towards the end of that portion while it was playing. The thing that I noticed, at least on my headphones, was that by inverting the phase while the Gullfoss was enabled, it really had a very minimal effect on the complete sound as a whole, which is a good indication that Gullfoss is in fact doing what it says it would do. Alright, now let's take a listen to the Gullfoss on some recorded drums. In order to adequately put this plugin through its paces, I recorded a budget drum set using budget microphones. Just as in the previous example as well, we're going to start this off bypassed first, and then we'll enable the Gullfoss so that you can hear the dramatic difference that it makes on a budget set of drums with budget mics. Loud music in 3, 2, and 1. I believe that in this case, just as in the last case, the plugin definitely speaks for itself. Not only was there definition added back into the tracks, but the minimal amount of phase issues that were prevalent in the original recordings seem to have disappeared. Now, leaving the Gullfoss bypassed, let's apply some of our own processing to see if we can get them to a little bit better sound. Loud noise in 3, 2, and 1. Now with our own processing enabled, the drums definitely seem to have gained a little bit more life, and the percussion strip plugin that we added to it definitely helped to give it a little bit more low end. Now let's see what happens when we use the processing enabled with the Gullfoss in the chain as well. Yet again, we're going to begin with the Gullfoss bypassed, and then we'll enable it as the drum track is playing. Loud noise in 3, 2, and 1. Although any time that you convey sound examples to an audience, the results are only subjective based on the hearer, I believe, in my personal opinion, the drums definitely sounded better before the processing was added and while Gullfoss was enabled. At least to my own ears, it seemed as if when the processing was added and Gullfoss was put into the mix, it seemed as if it almost overprocessed it. However, in the context of a full mix, it might actually be something that was pleasing. So although those results are subjective, I believe that we can all agree at least that the original recording versus that the Gullfoss was placed on definitely did not sound as good as when the Gullfoss was enabled. So once again, I believe that the Gullfoss is actually doing exactly what it's intended to do and everything that it says it will do. Now, let's listen to the Gullfoss on an entire mix. I purposely chose this mix because it's a densely populated mix with over 30 tracks. I'm going to loop a section that's towards this bridge area where every instrument is playing at the same time so that we can hear a better representation of the separation and the clarity that Gullfoss brings to the table. Now at this point, the mix has reached its finished state, and all of the processing that I could do to get it to sound as best as I possibly could has been done. I believe that the best way that we can accurately hear what the Gullfoss is doing is to hear sound examples back to back without any stopping in between. So therefore, we're going to listen to the mix with no processing whatsoever in its finished state, Then we're going to listen to the mix with my processing only. And then lastly, we'll listen to the mix with the Gullfoss only enabled. So in other words, the Gullfoss will be the only plugin apart from the limiter that's on the master bus that's doing any processing to the mix as a whole. If after this video, you're interested in hearing the song in its entirety, this is the song that we did in our Creating a Song Step-by-Step video series here on the channel. I'll include a link to that playlist above now. Okay, so as is typical on my channel, when I do a review on a product or a plugin, I usually give a practical application of that product or said plugin and show exactly how to use it and some scenarios in which it would be useful. I usually then follow that up with a deep dive over the controls. So let's take a deep dive now into the Gullfoss by Soundtheory. So let's talk a little bit about where Gullfoss got its name. Gullfoss is a famous Icelandic waterfall. Subjectively, it's one of the most beautiful in the world and with an unforgettable name. The inspiration for using the name of a waterfall for this plugin comes from one of the questions that was asked by the creators while developing their theory. That question was, why do waterfalls sound so pleasing? To answer, one could argue that a waterfall generates close to pink noise. However, that leads to a similar question, then why does pink noise sound so pleasing? Both waterfalls and pink noise come near to maximizing the amount of information perceived by your brain. So, in essence, they give your brain more of what it wants. Gullfoss, the software, is about organizing the information in the signal so that your brain finds the result more pleasing, just like a waterfall. The company Soundtheory actually emerged in 2016 after nearly 14 years of fundamental research. Their claim is that for more than a decade, they worked on an alternative approach to signal processing, inspired by quantum theory and mathematical methods such as non-commutative algebra, differential geometry, and information theory, hence the name Sound Theory. While doing this research, they discovered deep insights into how the human brain actually processes sound. This research then spiraled into the development of a new and unique method for real-time audio processing. If you were to talk with the creators of the Gullfoss EQ, they would tell you that they are particularly proud of their highly advanced human auditory perception model, which allows them to analyze sound the same way that a human would perceive it. So, their technology is entirely different from anything that has come before. It's worth mentioning that Gullfoss is not using artificial intelligence, or AI. It's not using neural networks, the Fletcher-Munson curves, traditional DSP methods, or even machine learning algorithms. Instead, Gullfoss is the first in a line of products that employ a computational auditory perception technology. And the rumor is that they are endeavoring to build upon this model for future endeavors even now. Alright, now for a deep dive into the controls that's found within the Gullfoss EQ. First, let's talk about the 5 main processing parameters: recover, tame, bias, brighten, and boost. Each one of these can be clicked and dragged up or down to change their value. You can also alt-click to change from 0 and the last value that was entered. Shift dragging will even allow you to make finer adjustments when dragging up and down, And while the parameter is highlighted, you can use the up and down arrow keys on your keyboard to change the value with the smallest possible granularity. So what do recover and tame do? These two parameters allow masked signal components to be revealed and will help you to improve the clarity, detail, and spatiality of the signal. This can either be achieved by reducing the intensity of components that are too dominant, or by increasing the intensity of components that are dominated by others. Tame treats the dominant components, while recover treats the dominated components. Now let's talk about the bias setting. So whether Gullfoss prefers to recover or to tame in borderline cases is controlled by the bias. Positive values set a preference toward recovering, whereas negative values bias towards taming. Moving on now to the brightness parameter. Gullfoss tries to push audio signals towards a well-balanced mix between all frequency components and audible elements. Often, the perceived brightness of a musical signal needs to be adjusted to match genre expectations or the musical context. The brighten control then affects the tame and recover decisions made by Gullfoss, so that the outcome is of the desired brightness. Negative values tend to make the sound darker, while positive values tend to make the sound brighter. Generally, values close to 0 should be preferred for an objectively well-balanced result. This parameter only affects the signal if either tame or recover are set to a non-zero value. And lastly, there's the boost. Like the perceived brightness of a signal, the balance between bass, treble, and mid frequencies is genre and context specific. The boost parameter simulates the change of the frequency balance as perceived by human listeners when the sound volume is changed. Increasing boost will emphasize the bass frequencies of a signal while reducing the mid frequencies. Use this parameter to match the result to your taste and the intended listening situation. The Gullfoss logo, located at the top left of the plugin, allows you to open an information dialog box. This contains your licensing information, plugin license activation and deactivation options, as well as copyright and contact information. On the far left-hand side, there are horizontal and vertical parameter meters. With the exception of boost, the main parameters have their own meters, which show the instantaneous effect of the parameters on the signal. The relevant meter lights up when you hover over the corresponding parameter control. The first vertical meter bar on the left shows the bias. It indicates whether the tame or recover is currently being preferred for the signal being played. Negative values show more taming, whereas positive values show more recovering. The second vertical meter is split into two parts. The top part belongs to the recover control and shows the total current effect of recover over all frequencies, and the bottom part shows the same information for the tame control. The horizontal meter below the equalizer display is associated with the brightness control. It shows how the current processing affects the perceived brightness of the input signal. Now let's talk a little bit about the output section. The output section is located on the right-hand side of the plugin. You can adjust the output gain using the gain slider. As with the main parameter controls, you can use Alt and Shift to reset the gain to 0 and to make finer adjustments respectively. The output gain does not affect the other processing stages. The bypass button offers a true processing bypass with delay compensation for proper A/B comparison. However, the processing engine keeps running, so the CPU load is not affected. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about the equalizer graph display. The way Gullfoss processes a signal can be compared to an equalizer that is continually adjusted to improve the clarity of the signal at every moment. The basis for this adjustment is a highly advanced model of human auditory perception that allows Gullfoss to understand what your signal really sounds like and how it can be improved. The main equalizer graph display provides you with the real-time information about the processing that Gullfoss performs. You can use this graph to understand the problems that Gullfoss is trying to deal with in your signal. For example, if you observe that the frequencies above 4 kHz are consistently lifted around 6 dBs, then you can implement this as a change in your mix to improve the sound independently of Gullfoss. If for some reason you do not want Gullfoss to work on the entire audible spectrum, you can restrict the processed frequency range by dragging in 2 range limiters from the far sides of the equalizer graph. One will exclude all frequencies below the limit marker, the other all frequencies above the limit marker. By reordering the markers, you can either exclude a frequency range from processing or exclusively process just a selected frequency range. The transition between active processing and inactive processing is smooth, and the strength of the processing is indicated by the red shade of the graph background. Even when outside the processing frequency range, you will find that the equalizer graph shows some processing. This is the result of any non-zero settings on the boost parameter and the dynamic loudness compensation. Lastly, located at the bottom are the input and the output peak amplitude level meters. This section provides basic metering of the peak levels of both the input and the output signals for both stereo channels. In mono mode, both the left and right meters will show the mono signal level. Signal amplitude levels above -12 dBs are held and displayed until released by a mouse click anywhere on the level meter. Although Gullfoss preserves the perceived loudness of the input signal during processing, the peak levels may change significantly. Therefore, make sure your processing chain provides enough headroom to allow for increased peak levels. So, Gullfoss is an intelligent equalizer that listens to a signal and decides how to prepare the audio so that your brain then can get the most information out of it. The real-time analysis of Gullfoss uses Soundtheory's computational auditory perception model to understand which audible elements are competing for your attention. Gullfoss allows for quick and precise fixes that would otherwise be unsolvable or would require a significant amount of time and experience to resolve those issues. According to their website, Gullfoss is even capable of fixing balancing issues between different sound elements without access to the individual tracks. The internal auditory model allows Gullfoss to make objective decisions about the perceived sound. As a result, mixes processed with Gullfoss will generally translate more consistently between different listening situations. This plugin, enabled by new patent-pending equalizer technology, processes audio with unrivaled sound quality. The equalizer is capable of changing its frequency response more than 300 times per second and without introducing audible artifacts or degrading signal quality. Together with the highly advanced computational auditory perception model that has been developed by Soundtheory, Gullfoss is definitely the first and only product of its kind. I hope this brief overview of the Gullfoss EQ has shown you exactly what this plugin is capable of and how to use it. If you would like to purchase the Gullfoss EQ for yourself, head on over to soundtheory.com and make your purchase there. All applicable links will be included in the description of this video. While you're here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so that every time I upload a new video, you'll be the first to know. If you have an audio friend who could benefit from the usage of this plugin, be sure to share it as well. And while you're at it, why not go ahead and give it a thumbs up? Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this review, and until next time, I hope you all have a blessed day.